the show where we explore the reality of people living the creator dream and help you turn your creator dream into reality. Today we have a super special guest, one of my bucket list guests, Cory Barton, who is an audio engineer for fiction stories and the founder of Cool Nerd Productions, an audio and music production company. And most importantly, he is my baby brother. So let's show Cory some love, even though he can't hear you. Cory in the house. I said, Cory in the house. Welcome, Cory. Thanks for being here.
What's going on? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so as I was saying before we started recording, I love your background so much. It is so hip and cool. I should have you design mine.
Yeah, it's some things you can't see too that I wish I could get in frame, but I actually have some skateboard decks that were painted by my tattoo artist.
Yeah.
He does these really cool pieces, which I can move the camera if you want me to. I can show you.
Yeah, show us.
They're actually really, really cool. Yeah, so these right here. You see that? That's Michael Jordan.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And then that is like Mother Nature.
I like that one better. That's my style.
That one for me was I was like, I gotta have that. Like I saw that and was like, man, like that is so amazing. And he draws a similar stuff to like that style where like that face is like very like prominent and strong. Like he does that quite a bit, and I love it.
Yeah, you just gave me an idea. Maybe I should have a tattoo artist on the show. That is a form of being a creator. It's not what you think. Most people think digital creators, but tattoo artists are definitely creators for sure.
Yeah, he's an artiste to say the least.
Yeah. Oh, now we're doing rhymes. Nice. We're doing rhymes.
that was a bar right there.
That was. All right, let's dive into our first segment. I call it content sponging because as creators, we have to soak up so much different forms of content, audio, visual, reading, watching, to keep our creative juices flowing. So what have you been content sponging on lately?
So right now, I'm kind of on like this self-realization journey. So a lot of it is therapy-based, but I've been really focused on just like bettering myself. So there's a couple things as far as content book wise that I've been reading. I've been reading The Will to Change, Masculinity and Love by Bell Hooks. And that's all about the world of masculinity, how it comes about and how we can change it. And me trying to be a better man. I got asked by a friend to be in like this book group. So we're reading that and it's really, really dope. So I would recommend that to any male or female if you want to read it. Mostly men. Men, please read it. Yes. But it's a great book, and that's really just inspiring me to really like view certain content different. Like when you can pick out like, ooh, like that's kind of patriarchal, or that's not actually good content. Like that's perpetuating like a stereotype. So I try to be more cognizant of that. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to pick that up and read it. So I've been reading that. As far as like anime, I've been watching Jujutsu Kaisen and Zom 100. I love anime. So that's something I've been partaking in. And then Why the Last Man, which is a comic book by DC Black Label. It's like DC Comics, but it's like adult. And it's the last man on Earth, full of a world full of women. And it's about like his story to like figure out why he's the last man. And it's like some of the most gruesome, but like funniest things happen to him. That's awesome. It's a good read.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I might have to pick that up because I don't do graphic novels or comics, but I've recently gotten interest in it just because I've never read it. So I was just at Barnes & Noble the other day and I grabbed a graphic novel, and I sat down in the corner and just flipped through it, a couple of them. And there's some on Kindle. I don't know how it's going to show up on Kindle, but I want to read some more comics and graphic novels just because I never have. And then one of my guests on this show, she learned how to write fiction through graphic novels. She said like the narrative structure is really tight. So I just wanted to check it out just to expand my mind.
Yeah, it's nice too when you can actually see the story versus just reading it. I visualize pictures. I can do pictures and I can hear the voice. I don't know if you've heard about some people can't hear the voice. Some people just do pictures.
Oh yeah, I have.
I can do both.
That.
Yeah. So I can paint pictures pretty well, but I like to view it how the person creating it viewed it. I think that makes a difference than just like explaining it. Like I want to see what you saw.
Yeah, me too. So for really most things, but like for like romance novels, I think it's better if the reader paints their own picture because you don't know what they want. And so, like, yeah,
Mm,
let them, like, do it vague. Be like, oh, he had blue eyes and wavy dark hair, but then, like, you fill in the rest of the details or whatever.
right, right. That kind of plays into their kinks as well too. Like if they like reading it for that reason, you know what I mean? Like let them kind of fill in where they feel it's gonna best please their mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then some writers aren't good at that. They be putting in too much detail. You be like, oh, why you say that? Why you say that? And so, yeah, that instruction, that's good advice, but not everybody follows the advice to let other people fill in the rest of the detail.
It's facts. It's facts.
Exactly. So let's go back to that bell hooks one for a second too. What is one nugget, if you could share it with men, that you have learned from that bell hooks book that you want more people to know about? And what's the name of
Oh
it again?
wow. It is The Will to Change. And then Bell Hooks is BELLHOOKS. One nugget? Oh my God, there's so many. They tackle a lot of things. And a big one is that like the patriarchy affects men just the same, if not worse, than it affects women. We think patriarchal as being something beneficial, but what the patriarch has done to men is it has caused us and promotes us to lock away our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes us to create this ideal version of what a man is, right? And so what sucks about this ideal of man is men buy into it, right? Other men will be like, oh, that's gay, or don't do that. You're not supposed to, that's not manly. But then women promote it too when they say, I want a real man. I want a man who provides, and I want a man who does this. That may not seem like it's a part of the patriarchy, but this whole like provider, mother stays at home, that's all patriarchal based. And so in that system, men are not allowed to feel, right? The true man is not allowed to feel. So I guess my one nugget would be like really challenge what it means to be a real man. Like if you're not allowed to cry, is that and suicide rates of men are going up
Yep.
and violence towards women is going up.
Mm-hmm.
Are we really benefiting from the patriarch? Like really, really benefiting? So that would be my nugget would be that question. It's for everyone to ask themselves that.
Yeah, and that's a good one. And while we're here, I want to plug a podcast. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but I recommend it to men and to women who care about men. And it's called Man Enough, the Man Enough podcast. And it has two men on there and a woman, and it's really good. Have you listened to it?
I've listened to bits and pieces. I still need to dive into it. Jillian listens to it. My fiance, she listens to it religiously. And we always talk about things from that episode, or if there's certain, because her and I, we talk weekly just about, you know, the readings that I'm doing and just like things that are going on in the world. Cause we try to have an open relationship where we open communication within the relationship where like we don't have any roles. You know what I mean? There's no breadwinner in this house, like that kind of thing. Like, so
Yeah.
we talk about that all the time. And that podcast really tackles the tough questions.
It does,
It
and it's
really
so
does.
good. And each personality on there is really interesting. So I highly recommend it for men and women. The Man Enough podcast. Oh my gosh, maybe one day I'll meet them since I'm a podcaster too. But they're really like interesting, conscious people for sure.
I could definitely see you being on that show as a guest. That should be
Yeah,
a bucket list item for you because that would be, I think you have some really good experiences to share. I mean, we had a really, looking back, we had a really good, nice household as far as like balance between the patriarchy and stuff. But like mom wasn't one of those moms who promoted be a man, don't cry. Like mom was more like, why are you crying? What's going on? Kind of mom. And
yeah,
so I think you would have a good experience, but that doesn't mean that we were like the perfect ideal. Like you there was other sides to the patriarchy, you know what I'm saying, that may have eked in. And I think you have a good balance of both, seeing both.
yeah. Especially being the only girl child in the household. But yeah, and then I
Mm-hmm.
was raised not to be a damsel in distress, but to be able to fight. I was able to wrestle with you guys and fight back. And my dad taught me self defense and to be tough, not too tough. You know, tough as a girl, not be a flimsy girl. So, and mom taught me that too because that's a strong woman.
And that is all, I'm realizing this now, that is all non-patriarchal. There are women who are raised to basically like you are not to show aggression, whereas men are like it's okay for you to show aggression. But like you said, you know, our parents were like, nah, like if somebody's stepping to you, step to them back. So
Exactly. Exactly.
it's
Yeah. And
amazing.
then I have a lot of insights from the different guys I dated. We all know I got stories for days. Stories for days. So yeah, one
Yeah,
day we'll put that out into the universe. We need me to be a guest on the Man Enough podcast.
let's do it.
All right, let's move into our next segment, A Day in the Life of the Creator, where we explore the actual day to day of what it's like in certain creator roles. So, you are an audio engineer for fiction stories as well as a music audio engineer. So, first, I'm curious, how did you get into that? When you were a teenager, did you know you wanted to be an audio engineer? What did you think you wanted to be? And then, what was your path getting to where you are today?
So when I was younger, I wanted to be, and I know you remember this, I wanted to be a chef.
Yep.
I was always cooking, always in the kitchen. Like that's what I wanted to do. And then I don't know, somewhere down the line, they had us do those occupational tests.
Oh, yeah,
And
school.
I didn't get chef. Yeah, I didn't get chef. And then I start reading about chefs like, what these tests don't mean everything. So I start reading about it. And the failure rate of restaurants is really high. And I was like, I don't want to be in a failing industry, which is funny because I became an audio engineer. But so I'm like, I don't want to be in an industry that where like failure is like that prominent. So, but I also didn't want to be like a mechanical engineer is what they had like. So I was like, what am I going to do now? So I ended up going to school for being a computer engineer because I loved computers, but found that wasn't great. And the whole time I was making beats in the dorm room, right? So I eventually got into music. Now, after college, ended up transferring schools, going for music and audio production. And I just randomly went to Amazon and they had a job for something called audiobooks. I didn't know what that was. And so I applied, got the job. And during all this time, podcasts didn't exist.
Yeah.
And then podcasts started to pop. And I started to see the similarities between the two. Like audiobooks is basically podcasts. I can do both. So then I started applying for podcasting jobs. So that's how I got into it. That's the long road, right? But what's funny about all of this is when I was, I think maybe a sophomore, junior. Do you remember Literature is Entertainment? That class? Did you take that?
No, I
Literature is Entertainment?
took law and literature and entertainment. It's a different class.
Okay. I took Literature as Entertainment, and it was this class where like we got to watch like Harry Potter and like compare the books to the films kind of thing.
Yeah.
And for one of the projects in class, I don't know how this happened. Me and my guy Lee, he was on the basketball team. We ended up making an audio version of a story we wrote.
Oh my gosh.
And at the time, there was people didn't think of this as but it had like sound effects. I went out and got sound effects and put all this stuff together. And it's probably sounded terrible. I mean, we pitched his voice up to sound like a girl.
Oh my God.
It was like, people thought it was hysterical. It was like satire. It was supposed to be like funny and comical, but it had all of this stuff. And I didn't realize this until you asked me this question. I saw the question log. I was like, that was my first podcast for real. But I kind of just brushed that off. Like I thought nothing of it. And then sure enough, later on in life, this ended up happening, right? There's also the instance of me and Chad going to New York and taking my dad's boombox and making those tapes. Those were podcasts. We would just talk into the stereo about what we were doing, thoughts that we had on things, but podcasts didn't exist. I mean, CDs were still expensive back then, right? So we were recording on like tapes. And so that was like, we did that every summer and we would do 2 full hours. No, how long were those tapes? Those tapes were like 6 hours, 6 or 8 hours. We would do 6 or 8 hours of content.
Okay, Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And then we would just listen back to it and like create content. Like that's what we did. Really random.
See, but so you know what's interesting here though is because you were able to get stable employment on the back end of podcasts. Most people, when they think podcast, they only think the person in front of the mic, but so much goes on behind the scenes to produce a podcast.
Yes, there is a lot. And I don't even do all the things. Like I don't do sound design. I mean, I started off doing sound design in those stories, but sound design's tough, especially in the fictional world. And you know, you bring up Joe Rogan, like somebody has to make his vocal sound good and you know, edit and cut and chop and do all of that stuff. So it's Yeah,
and then so what exactly is the audio engineer role? What's the difference between the audio engineer, the sound designer, the executive producer? What are these different roles like, and what do you do in your role?
So I actually just got my first producer role, but producer is someone who is in charge of the content, who dictates the direction of the content, right? They're not necessarily technically savvy always. They can be. I've met a lot who are because it helps. But a producer basically can say, hey, at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, we want a wind sound effect to come in here, and then it's going to fade at this time. And then we would like to build. So these are the people who are kind of like directing the content, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are producers, and they're the creative minds. They're the people who tell the engineers and the sound designers what it is that they want. Now, as far as an audio engineer is a generic term, but my job is so dope. When I got hired, I was an audio editor, but I
Mm-hmm.
talked to him and I was like, I do more than editing. So I'd rather be an engineer, and actually gave me that title. So shout out to them.
And shout out to you
And
for asking.
well, yeah, it was getting to the point where I was like, this isn't really my job description. And my manager at the time was like, yeah, it's not a good resume builder. And I was like, exactly. Like, she didn't fight me on or nothing. She's like, so what would you want to be? And she changed it that day.
Nice. That is
Just
so
got it
good.
changed.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So it's an amazing company. And so being an engineer pretty much means I do a wide variety of things, and mostly in the technical realm is how I would describe it. So you and I are talking right now on microphones. There might be like times where there's lull in the conversation, or things that need to be cut, or maybe there's a buzzing sound behind me and it needs to be removed, or any type of like technical sound thing that happens. Maybe I'm smacking my lips a lot. There's software that can get rid of those things, and someone has to be able to run that software correctly. We have all this AI technology stuff, but there are people out there who know how to run these plugins, is what they're called, or software, and can get rid of that stuff. So that's what the engineer or dialogue editor does. And he also just cuts the good takes, right? We might do 6 or 7 takes of the same scene, but it's my job to go through and pick the best scenes. So that's what the engineer editor does. The sound designer takes that dialogue edit that I've done,
Mm-hmm.
and they add all the cool stuff. So all the footsteps and the atmospheric element, like we're in a cabin and it actually sounds like we're in a cabin. Like, that's their job to do that. And it's a very complicated job.
I was just
It
about to
is
say
not
that
easy.
sounds insane. Cause like nonfiction is more straightforward. Like it's people talking. There's the interview style like this, and there's like the news style where you do have to splice in like clips of interviews and news takes, and that's a bit complicated. But
Mm-hmm.
fiction sounds the most complicated because you have to. It's immersive. You have to immerse the listener in the story, and there's so much that goes on with that.
Yeah, little things you wouldn't think of. Like, so the writing also has to be good. Writing has to be tailored to audio. You can't say, go pick that up over there. What's that? And where's there? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but then also, you don't want the narrator to be narrating everything that's happening, because it takes you out of this immersion, right? So it's this happy balance of, you write in like stage notes, person walks to the left and picks up metallic object, right? And
Mm-hmm.
instead of someone saying like, something more direct, like, pick that up, they have to be specific, like in what they're saying. Hey, can you pick up that spoon from the kitchen? And then it'll go to the left. They'll have kitchen sounds play or something like that. You know what I mean? And then like a
Yeah.
metallic object, and you hear it. And so now it's like, oh, I'm there. And the narrator's not like, so and so picked up the spoon, and that takes you out of it, right? So it's literally just the people have to be written so that the conversation can be heard and understood.
Oh my gosh, that is the whole team. Like, hats off. I have, like, I don't know what you call it, but I have some type of audio blindness where it's hard for me to follow fiction in audio form. Like, I have to read it. Like, it's very weird. I have a friend who's like that too. But for, like, it just takes so much precision to get it right. I feel like maybe with the right writing or like the right situation I could follow it, but yeah, I have trouble. And for like I am grateful to people who write precisely for people like me who have trouble following fiction in audio form, for sure.
Yeah, it's tough though, for that exact reason. It's like it's gonna be hard to follow, but if you have a really good sound designer, it's actually not. Like, if you guys get a chance, listen to some of the Realm podcasts, some of the more recent. My favorite one is Blood and Gold. It's about Joaquin Morieta. He is the real Zorro. It's a great story, and we can talk about that later if you want, get more into it. But it's great. The submersion of that story and everything that's happening. like the fight scenes and like you feel like you in a fight. You know what I mean? Like it's like really, it's gripping. It's good stuff. So
Yeah,
check it out.
that sounds interesting for sure. And now walk me through the process of producing a fiction story. Like, okay, actually, I don't know. I was about to start making up stuff, but like a writer writes it, then it goes to the producer. I don't know what happens. So anyway, walk us through a fiction story from development to your part to who you pass it off to.
There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that I'm totally unaware of,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll give you the gist. So someone has a story that they either want to make or that we've acquired from somebody that we want to make. And so we sit down and you have to have people who plot out calendar wise, like what it can look like. Okay, what is the story about? When is the best time to release this? What does our current schedule look like? So there's a lot of logistics that happen before any writing even happens to see if we can do it. What kind of, is it going to be multicast or single cast? Is it going to be, who is somebody that, what is the story about and who is people that we think we can get on this? Because now, like real actors, high level actors are doing fiction podcasts. We had Gabourey Sidibe do a podcast for us. Sarah Natochenny, who's the voice of Ash Ketchum of Pokemon. We've had just a ton of Max Greenfield, who was in New Girl, Schmidt from New Girl. We've had him do stuff for us. So it's like you got to kind of plot in your mind like who you want. Like, do we want this to be star-studded or is this something small? Like, what is it? So then after they figure out all those logistics, they start writing. They get a team together, and a team usually gets together and writes. And my supervisor who wrote a story for us kind of showed what that looked like. It is crazy process with these whiteboards and like, I mean, you know how story writing goes, right? Like, so you gotta be like, okay, like here's our main antagonist, here's our protagonist, here are all of our characters, here's how the plot should move, and then like as things come up, issues come up, you got to move that stuff around. So nothing is ever concrete, right? You're always constantly moving stuff around. So all of that gets written. Once it's written according to the schedule, they start setting in place record dates of, okay, we got to record this by this date because we got to edit it by this date, sound design it by this date, and release it by this date. But that also means, okay, we got to start casting by this date. So once it starts to get written, they're like, okay, this can be really good. Let's see if we can get this person. And we have a company that does like all the casting. And then we start getting some celebrities that come in, it gets really exciting. Like, ooh, can we get this person? This person seems interested, right? It's all of this like back and forth and everybody's getting hyped. And then some people's disappointed and we hyped again. Like contracts is not being signed. Like this person is not doing this. Like it's wild. Then they have to write in like social media stuff too, right? So like we might want to cast somebody, but they don't really do good social media. So it's like, do we really want that person if they're not gonna? But this person not only does social media, but they got an interview coming up on some talk show and they can plug us.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, let's do that. Let's go that route because that would get us more. So it's like story, but it's also like marketing and like you got to be smart about it. So once it's written, we cast it, we record it, and that's when they ship me the audio and it begins, right? I start editing, going through all of the different takes, compiling things together. And I do about an episode a week. So you got to think if it's an 8-episode show, that's 8 weeks, that's 2 months. It takes to edit these things down. I can do it a little bit faster at times, but normally like there's some type of issue that's going to happen. Like something happens, right? We were recording a project just recently. And after recording 5 episodes worth of stuff, this woman decided, or somebody decided, like, let's change her accent.
Oh, no.
And I think it's because she sounded too much like the other character. Like, I kind of heard it when I was editing it. Like, they sound kind of similar.
Yeah.
Somebody probably picked up on that and was like, okay, we got to give her an accent. So then she came back with, like, an Indian American style, like, accent. And it was like, I had to go back and, like, not necessarily replace because they had sent it to me already, but, like, it was all recorded together, right? They're all recording not in the same room, but on the same Zoom call.
Yeah.
So then I have to use her old take of her regular voice as just a guide. And then the pickups she did, I have to replace it. And
oh my gosh, this sounds so complicated. Like plastic surgery, but with audio.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. So the editing process takes a long time. And I consider myself to be really good and efficient, but you just run into things and it's nobody's fault. You know, you just want the content to be the best it can be. So they change a lot of things, and then it gets shipped off to our sound designer, who is amazing. And he has this session that has like 50 tracks of audio and all this craziness going on. And he does all this sound design and adds all these effects, and then it gets shipped off. You know, it's kind of like, I don't get to hear it until it's like done. You know,
Yeah.
I can just hope that the cool things that I did actually make it. Cause sometimes I kind of do things on the fly to make things cooler, especially fight scenes. I've gone through and just like really compiled something out of nothing to make like these fight scenes, or to replace certain dialogue that they didn't get recorded by mistake. So it's cool to see like how what I've done kind of like set us up for success ends up being in the final product.
Yeah, and do you work
It's really cool.
mostly independently or is it as a team? Like I know like each member of the team touches it, but your actual work is pretty independent, right?
Yeah, that's the thing about audio work. There is no way to like, they're coming up with ways, but there right now as it stands, there is no way as a group to effectively work on the same project. And how would I, it's not like a Word document, but I guess it's similar, right? Like if you and I were working in a Word document together, you could kind of see where my cursor was, you know what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
as I'm typing, and you can imagine how that could be problematic, because as I'm working, you're also working. And unless we're on a direct communication, like we could be working on two different things, but they're going to affect each other. You
Oh
know what I
yeah, I hate
mean?
when
And
people
that's,
are in my document. I won't allow it. So what I've always done is instead of working on the team document, I work on a separate document on my own until I am done, and then I copy paste it to the team document because I do not like people in my document with me.
and that's the problem with audio. There's no efficient way to work like that. So they're trying to create technology to do it, but as it stands right now, there is nothing that does that. So as far as when you work, you're on your own. Like they expect you to kind of know your stuff, to have a pretty good handle on the story. Cause a lot of the times I'm editing stuff and I don't know what it's about, but there's benefits to that, right? If I don't know what it's about, then I can give you a real reaction if something is wrong or something seems off.
Oh yeah.
Like that's the beauty of being like, okay, Cory, take the audio. I can also get your opinion on what you think, but also like do your thing. And then there's been times when I've been like, hey, this person says this, but before they said this, and they go, oh snap, like we didn't catch that in all the record, because he's recording hundreds and hundreds of lines of dialogue, right? So he might just
Yeah.
miss something and be like, oh okay. So it doesn't happen often, but every now and again I catch some things, or again, like I said, something got missed in recording, like, oh, we missed that line. I'm like, well, 3 episodes ago she said something similar. I can probably go grab it. And so that kind of, I think, is what makes me valuable. Is I don't have photographic memory, but I have a real good memory on like what I've already heard. And I'm like, I think
Yeah.
we have something that can work, or I can be like, yo, I don't think this is gonna work. We're gonna need some rereads, which
So
is
you do a
often,
little bit of
what
develop.
that
Well,
is.
in the book world, like print and book, it would be called a developmental editor. But like you find that continuity. Like if you said she was 28, but now she's 32, but the time didn't actually pass. Like you can find that like a developmental editor.
Yes, and I learned that from doing audiobooks, because in your world, I don't mean to rag on your world, but a lot of times in this book writing world, like these people aren't spending the money to really have their stuff checked. And
This
there's
is
been
true.
times where our narrators have been like, wait a minute, we're in France. This says Germany now. And then like we gotta call the author and be like, hey, where are we right now?
Oh
Like
my
in this
god.
book. And we've had to stop recording because we're like, well, I don't want to record this, and we're now in Germany. We did the whole thing in the beginning in France. Like what? And then we've had to go back and fix stuff. So
Oh
it's
my
like,
gosh.
so we, all of us pretty much have been in that world and have done that before. And it's like, we don't want to do that. So they really tight on details. And that's why they do those storyboards, and they keep
Yeah.
everything, together and tight.
Yeah, I've read some
So
books
yeah.
where the details change like crazy. And like there was a review I got back when I wrote books that I didn't understand, but now I understand it more now that you said this. The person did not like my story, but they said the editing was on point. They're like, I don't know about these characters or this story, but they're like, this writer can edit. This editing is tight. And I was like, why would somebody just randomly compliment my editing? But that's why.
It gets so bad. And the thing about doing like locations like that, the reason why I use that example is because you might have in an audiobook that person doing a French accent now for like a little off character.
Yeah.
But that character maybe had like 10 lines, but they're like, oh, we're in France and now we're in Germany. And you're like he could have done a German accent, but now we're going to
Yeah.
have to go back and redo it. Like,
Oh
it's just
my
work.
gosh.
It's just extra work.
That is messed up. So anyway, tell me, what are 3 to 5 things you have to get done each week to keep your job as an audio engineer going?
Like, do you mean like from a mental standpoint, like things that like for the betterment of me that I have to do, or like literally things that I'll do or I'll lose my job?
Actually, let's do both. I was only thinking of one, but both of these will give me some good information. So let's do
Okay.
first. Let's do the literal things. Like, what are your like? Let's say you have Asana or Monday. What are your Asana or Monday tasks? We kind of covered some of it with the process, but like, do you have meetings? Do you have check-ins? Things like that.
Yeah. So when it comes to working for the company that I do, and like it used to be, it's a startup, but it used to be a lot more meetings, but now it's a lot less. They consolidated it a lot, which is nice. So I don't actually have a ton of meetings. I just, on Monday, I make sure to send out what I'm going to do for the week.
Mm-hmm.
And you know me, I'm super detailed. So I send out like what I'm doing, specifically what chapters of what, because I work on a few different things. Some stuff, sometimes I'm editing original content, but we don't make original content all the time. So sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I'm working in the process of, we have pretty much what are like living feeds. So like what sucks about fictional podcasts is like you listen through it once and then like you're done, it like dies. Like the actual content page, it dies. You know what I mean? No one visits it anymore
Oh yeah.
because once they listen through it, that's it. It's not like a Joe Rogan podcast that has an episode every week. It's like there's 10 episodes here and it's done. And
Yeah.
so what they've done now is they've created living fictional feeds with narrators or hosts who replay stuff that we've already released, but give some backstory to it. Here's a story, blah, 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 by this person. This person has done this. Like, you know,
Oh
like
yeah.
they host it.
Yeah.
And so it gets recycled in a way, but it's refreshed. Like you can revisit it, but now with a different like mindset because it has a host to it. There's some details. There's some cool things being incorporated there. So I work on some of those. So even though there's shows that maybe I have edited already, I have to get those back out. So I have those kind of things on my list and I'm working like months and months in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal for the week is pretty much to just hit those numbers, but also touch base with my supervisor, make sure like everything's good in terms of like, is anything going to come up? Because things do come up, but just touching base. That I think that's the one thing, touching base, getting a grip on what the schedule should look like for the week, and then allowing yourself to have space for things to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Super important. You shouldn't
Well, how
overwork
are the
yourself.
deadlines? How are the turnaround times in what you do? And I want you to have 2 points of reference: where you work now and when you work for the audiobook company, just in general as an audio engineer. Does it differ by company? But what's those deadlines and turnaround times like?
The deadlines for our company are much better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So speaking to Amazon is a huge company with deadlines that do not move because it is on a corporate level. They're printing packaging. The packaging has that the release date is already there. This is it. We're going to hit it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have little to no say. If something comes up, I better get it fixed, right?
Yeah.
If I got to stay late, I got to stay late to get it fixed because it's not just the audio that's concerned, right? The packaging, the CDs are being pressed, all of that stuff. So it's like the deadlines are really, really hard, super hard deadlines. In comparison to the company that I have now, deadlines are deadlines, but they like to say around here, we're not saving the world.
Mm-hmm.
So if something comes up, we want it to be right versus wanting it to be on time. And so I have a lot more control and say over like, Fred, this don't sound good. I think we should move it out a week.
Yeah.
And it happens because we don't want that. You know what I mean? So it's, or if I get sick or someone, gets sick, which has happened, and it'd been like, well, we could give that to somebody else on the team, but they're not going to understand it. By the time they figure out what this person was doing, I'm going to be back.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, let's just move it out a week. It's not the end of the world. Let's just move it out a week. And so that's how we do it. But we try to work so far ahead that that's not an issue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
And that's the best way to be, being with a company that works ahead and not as things are happening in real time. Like, I don't like tight deadlines myself, personally.
yes, it's not fun. They used to be a little bit tighter, and then Realm started to realize like kind of what was changing in the industry with all this, because we were doing a ton of original content, and it's like, we can't afford to keep doing original content all the time, and because there was some things that were happening in the fictional side of things where like it was looking pretty bad,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't for us because we were smart about it without giving out specific company details or anything like that. But we were just smart about it. You know what I mean? But original content, having constant original content like that is just not doable. But that's like during COVID, that worked because everybody was in the house listening to content. So it worked.
Yeah.
But you can't do that now. Everyone's back and not everyone's listening all the time. So you got to squeeze more out of what you have.
Yeah, and I will circle back around to the second half of the question, like, what do you do to stay going personally? But another question popped into my head, so I'm going to address it. Are you guys affected by the writer's strike, or is it a different union? And the actor strike, too.
Without getting too much into detail, I would say yes. Yes and no. It's complicated. There's a lot of talks in the podcast world because not only is this strike happening, but now it sounds like the gaming industry is about to do a strike next,
Mm-hmm.
which would affect voice actors. That probably would affect us if that does happen. Definitely, because voice actors aren't being paid
Oh, so voice
either.
actors are a part of the gaming family of performers, not necessarily the SAG AFTRA. Like, I don't know where they
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So like what they're striking now is more so like on set acting, which is different. It's not really covered in the past. So while that was going on, we were recording stuff because it's not the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we pay for the studio time, we pay our actors whatever rate that we can that we agree on. You know what I mean? We get fair rates, so it's different, but we're not. There's certain things that like we are contractually not allowed to do. Like we can't have them screaming for hours and hours on end, right? And
Yeah.
losing their voice. Like is in terms of what the actors are fighting for now, it's totally different. It's we don't belong to any of the Netflix or you know what I mean, any of those big
Yeah.
companies. We release on completely different platforms. So it's not it didn't affect us, but I have a feeling that it might start to.
Yeah, and where do your writers come from? If you're not a part of WGA, the TV and movie writers union, who are your writers?
They're people like you.
Oh,
They're
just
literally people like you who just write stories. We have submissions on our website that we take, and I think that's dope. Like we work with a lot of different people. Sometimes the writers come from the third parties that we work with. If we're working with WB or any other big company, you know what I'm saying, like that, like they might have their writers already, but these are like book writers. You know what I mean? And some of
yeah.
these people aren't authors at all. Like my supervisor, as far as I know, he ain't wrote no books, but he's wrote a bunch of podcasts.
Oh, that is really
So he's just
cool.
a storyteller. Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome to know. And do most of your people who write your stories have agents that represent them, or do you guys work directly with the writers?
I think they prefer to work. Like I said, we cast through a third party. So my guess is that if they're not a part of an agency, we would struggle to work with them. Although, like, there's been people that I've suggested like that we can work with, and they're like, "Oh, that would be cool. Maybe we'll reach out to them." So they do reach out to certain people directly, but like when we have multicast of like we need a barista, we need a taxi driver, we need you know what I mean, all these like small characters, we just go through the agencies. Like, do you have anybody
Yeah.
who's a black male or Hispanic female? Like, you know what I mean? And then they send those people over to us
Yeah,
for
very
audition with
cool.
their
And
auditions.
that's cool that this is separate from SAG and after. Like, I really feel for those writers and actors, and I hope they win and what they're fighting for. But like, it has been hard as a consumer that all my entertainment has stopped. But I'm glad that there's still like creatives can still work. Like, there's still writers who can pitch your stories to you guys. There's voice actors who can work with you guys. So I'm glad part of the entertainment industry is still chugging along, and I hope that you're not affected and that it continues to keep creating.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been working, man. We've been trying to make sure everybody is equally paid, but also we're really big on minority hires.
Mm-hmm.
So we hire a lot of minorities, and I work with predominantly women.
Nice.
So the company, yeah, the company is just all about like, not that we don't hire certain individuals for certain reasons, but it's just nice to know that like this is coming from our company really values like diversity, like real diversity. Like there's a lot of people of color that I work with. There's a lot of women voices that I work with, but there's also still your majority voices too, the white males of the world. You know, my supervisor is a white male, and I consider him to be an ally in all the fights. You know what I mean?
Nice.
You can hear it in the stories. You know what I mean? You can hear it. So that's why I really like working for this company.
Yeah, very nice. And you're like an ambassador for Rome. Like everybody come work for Rome. Let's circle back around. I'm being a disorganized host, but let's go back to what it takes to keep your job going from a mental and physical perspective. Like how do you stay in the game?
Yeah. So when you do audio is it's a lot of brain work and a lot of physical. It wouldn't seem like it, but it's a lot of physical, right? So ear fatigue is a real thing. Sometimes I've even had ear pain
Mm.
from listening things too loudly and for too long, specifically in the high frequency range. High frequencies will always tire your ears out. So you have to be really careful about the type of headphones, the type of speakers you have. Like these headphones here, these are $500.
Ooh, oh my
And
God.
yeah. And so like having the top of the line stuff, because the old headphones that I had, they're very tinny and high rangey, and they would always tire my ears out. So I need a flatter response. But you can't find those kind of things cheap, right? So you got to spend a little money to protect your physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want your ears to start lying to you, because if they start lying to you, you start producing bad mixes. Clients are like, what's going on? You know what I mean? That's why it's important
Yeah.
not to drink. I don't suggest drinking or smoking. I know you see a lot of people in the video smoking in the studio. Not in mine. Not in mine. Don't smoke. Don't drink. Like we're here to listen, because you notice people who are drunk can't hear,
This is
right?
true. They be screaming.
Screaming. Why is that? Because the high end, where the clarity of things is rolled off, alcohol rolls off your top end, and that's where all your clarity is at. So you can't hear anything. And so
Mm.
now you got this drunk person screaming at you. So if I'm sipping a little something and I'm making a beat, that's one thing, but I'm not going to mix the beat. I'm just generally just laying down ideas, right?
Yeah.
Cool. But if you're working on a client and there's some clarity and accuracy needed, you can't do that. Can't do that at all. So there's that. Ear breaks, substances, try to stay away from them. Reference mixing is important. People's ears lie to them all the time. There is a trick that studios use where on their boards, there's usually a knob somewhere that isn't programmed to do anything. Like it's just either on a track somewhere that's not being used. And when the client says that they want something that an engineer doesn't necessarily agree with, they will turn that knob and say, how does that sound? And the client will always say, sounds better.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. It's a psychological trick. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So mixing is so much psychological. I've done it to myself. I've been turning knobs like, ooh, wait, this is sounding better. And the plugin is bypassed, meaning it's not even processing anything. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I need to stop. I need to take a break,
That sounds like
because like I'm
something I
tricking
would do.
myself
I'd be
now.
like, oh my gosh, I'm jamming. This is so smooth. And like nothing's happening.
Nothing at all. I've done it. I do it all the time, at least once a week, where I've bypassed something and didn't realize, and it's not doing
Oh
anything.
my gosh,
So
I'm crying a little bit.
yeah, so that's what we do. So it's important to like reference mix, like have something that like you want your stuff to sound like, and then try to match it. So collecting references is important. I used to have my set references, and a lot of engineers do, but I have nowadays I tend to reference things that I'm liking as of late,
Mm-hmm.
just to keep my ears up. Like I really liked this song last week. I'm going to use this as a basis. Or I really like this album, and this is kind of the vibe I want to go for. I'm going to use this as a basis
But wait, but
to
how do
where I'm
you
going to go.
know? I guess maybe you know because you've worked in this industry so long what went into making it sound the way it did. Like for example, this concept is familiar to me because as a copywriter we have something called swipe files. And if you see like an ad, we say it out in the wild, but if you see an ad out in the wild, out in the world, you take that copy like an email, if somebody wrote something and sell you something, you're like, oh, that was sweet, that made me buy it. You save it, or like a blog post, whatever. You have this swipe file and that's your reference, what you're talking about, but it's right in front of you. It is written. I see what words they put into it. I can say, oh, they use the curiosity question here. They use reverse psychology there. But how would you know in audio? Because you weren't in the studio when that piece of reference material was being made.
That's what makes good engineers and bad engineers. Can you hear what's done and know how to do it? That right there, like, is the mystery of the world. And then if you do something that can't be copied, that's what makes you a hot commodity, right? So if you're doing things that are easily copyable, if that's not a word, but easily copied, the technique might not be as sound as you think or as amazing as you think. And if you can do things that people just can't duplicate, that's what makes you unique. So when I'm listening to things, my brain is working within my workflow. Like, okay, the bass here sounds a little bit bigger, but not like they turned it up. It sounds like they did this. And so like, I'll attack it that way. Like maybe they did this. It sounds like maybe they boosted the harmonics in the low end. Maybe this is parallel compression. Maybe this is a little bit of limiting and then a little bit of EQ. And then like, not only that, what order did they do it in? Right. So maybe they did turn it up. Maybe they did do some harmonics. Maybe they did do parallel compression and all these things, but in what order? What order, what way? How did they do it? They did the parallel compression, but what did they put on the parallel channel? So now I got to not only mix the channel, but the parallel channel and try to balance both to get one sound. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like this is, so sometimes within the industry, somebody be like, hey man, can you do this? You got to be honest. If you want that sound, you got to contact that engineer.
Oh, contact.
I don't know how to do that. You just got to contact but that's what you're telling the artist. Like if you want your mix to sound like this person's mix,
yeah,
you should go to them. And I have no problem saying that because what's going to end up happening is you're going to be mixing and then they're going to be like, no, that's not it. And when you're on mix 47 of not getting it right, like you don't give up. You know what I mean? It's going to be like, man, what did I get myself into? So it's better in the beginning, just be honest. Like, hey, I don't know how to do that. I can do something similar, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah, and so with that's a good segue to go into marketing and into monetization, like dealing with clients and stuff. So let's move on to our next segment, marketing and monetization methods, where we talk about how to make money as a creator. So how do audio engineers make money as a creator?
They don't. I'm gonna be honest, they don't for
hilarious.
Real. Well, most of them is broke. I mean, we struggle, you know what I mean? That's why I made that reference earlier about going from a chef to this. Like it's not really that much better, but as far as like how to monetize your talents, you got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And for me, that was audiobooks and podcasts. Everybody wants to do music. Everybody want to work with rappers and make beats. Everybody wants to do that. And from my dorm room, I paid for some of my tuition by doing that, but it wasn't gonna feed me for the rest of my life. Like I could tell, like it's too finicky. It's too much work for the little pay that you get. Like not everyone has a great budget. You know, you're spending 8 hours to mix a record in the beginning and getting $50.
Ooh, no.
So it's just it's not adding up. Right. But as you get better, you start using templates. You start doing it in half the time, you know, $50 at 4 hours. Okay. You're on to something. You're getting better. But then at what point do you raise your prices and your values to your clients? And does that you know, scare people away when you do that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like knowing the market. What genre are you in? What's really required when you're doing it? How good is your client's ear? Remember the knob on the board? We do that when we mix too. Like sometimes we not really putting all the good stuff on you because your budget was $50. So I'm gonna give you the $50 plugins. You know what I mean? And some people love. I've had people like, oh my God, this is great. I had a longtime client that I used to mix all the time. Man, shout out Kato. He was great, but we had got so good with working with each other that I was able to copy and paste from another song because he would record the same songs in the same nights.
Mm-hmm.
And it just worked. We just adjust little things here and there. We didn't have to do too much
That's
because we were on
nice.
like a schedule. That's what you want. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure, these podcast engineers, they do the same thing. Once I mix your vocals for your show, I'm not going to do that every time. I'm going to import it from the last time, tweak it a little bit, and then ship it back to you. So it's like, that's how you start making money. You got to first really like build your arsenal of templates that you can use. And then that's going to cut down hours of work,
That makes
literally
sense.
hours.
And then, like, as you get more experience too, it just takes shorter amount of time to do stuff.
Yeah, you just know. Like, I can tell you right now, and no one may know what this means, but if you give me a vocal, I'm going to roll off the low end at least 80 to 120. I'm going to cut at 250. I'm going to cut at 500. I'm going to boost 2K. And I'm either going to take a high shelf up or down, depending on what mic you use.
I have no idea what you
I just
meant,
know
but
that.
to me it sounds like
Right.
drugs. It sounds like you're chopping cocaine, doing a kilo, 250 grams, and putting the top shelf liquor on the shelf, and like that's what it sounds like to me, like some drug trafficking. But okay.
Yeah, but I just know that, right? Like, it's like when you, it's almost like when you write in certain parts of a story, right? You know what people aren't going to like. You know what doesn't work. So why even bother trying to flesh out an idea that involves those ideas? Like, people don't like when you do this thing, then you can't do it. Or there's certain trope that people get annoyed with. You know what I mean? Like, just don't do it because people don't like it. There's no point in trying to like work around it or work through it if you know it's bad.
Yeah.
So just do what you know works.
That makes sense. And I'm curious, is AI making it easier where you can make more money per hour because you can produce more things more quickly, or is it not there yet in the audio realm?
I was just having this, I just posted about this. I don't know if you saw my post
No, I
about this.
didn't
I
get to
just
see
posted
it.
about this. It was an Instagram story. But so we have to be very careful what we call AI. An algorithm that inputs information and then outputs something is not artificial intelligence, right? That's just an algorithm. That's just a program. Because if I give it those things, it has a certain set of parameters and then it spits something out, right? Artificial intelligence has the ability to learn from itself, right? So like if I input something, I can give that program feedback, or that program can learn from what it did and then adjust or change on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
So by that definition, a lot of this software is just automated algorithms, right? And you know that because if I say, let's say there's a hip hop preset on a piece of software, and I put in my audio and it scans it, it's gonna put certain things. It's gonna put the EQ here, the compression here is gonna do that. If I delete it and do it again, which I've done, try it again, see what happens. It'll give me the exact same results. It's the same thing. Certain things might be slightly different because it's scanning in real time, so it might be a slightly different section of the song or something like that, but it's the same thing. If I say, no, software, I don't like when you boost the low end, it's still going to boost the low end. It's not learning. It's not intelligent. You know what I mean? It's just an automated process. So that's the thing that is going to save our jobs and our careers, is that it's not intelligent. It's just algorithms. And the algorithms are a great starting point. I use Isotope, which is a big company that uses what's called an assistant, where it'll scan your audio, it'll show you where everything is, and then it'll be like, what do you want it to sound like? And I can say hip hop, and it'll give me all of these. It'll set all the plugins. I just did it. It'll set all the plugins, and it'll actually sound really good. And I go,
Nice.
oh wow, like this sounds great. But that's a great starting point. I'm not going to sell that to my customer. You know what I mean? Like, there's clearly some things you can do to make it better. So I go in and I sweeten it up, and that's where we come in. It'll help our workflow, make it quicker, but it's not going to replace us anytime soon because it can't learn.
That's good to hear for audio engineers. I, as a writer, am in danger of being replaced. The AI, actually, there's debate in this industry too. Is AI intelligent enough to replace writers? But I think to a degree it is. I finally got to the point with AI where I could get it to spit out some pretty good stuff. At first I couldn't. I was like, oh, this is trash. AI will never replace me. But now I learned to prompt engineer better. and it can spit out some pretty decent copy. So I'm like, oh man, I may need to pivot real quick. But I'm glad for you guys that it sounds like the AI is not as intelligent, and it may not even actually be AI anyway. So that is good news.
And the thing about it is even in your industry, in both of our industries, it's only producing what has been done, right?
That's
It's
true.
only referencing what has been done already. It's just taking what's already been done and putting it in a different, like weaving it different. That's how it's able to do that art style stuff. That's stuff that people already drew, different styles they've already used. It's just putting them together in different ways, which to me doesn't replace any. It makes for a good producer. You know what I mean? Like to
Yeah.
get some good ideas, but it doesn't replace that ability to create new thoughts and new processes and new ideas. And so if my client, if I'm only using AI and he's like a client I was just working with, he's like, hey, I don't think it sounds a little too dry. I need a little bit more reverb over this master that you gave me. It didn't put reverb on it because the reference that I gave it didn't have reverb on it,
Mm-hmm.
but he wanted reverb. So what does the client want? The client isn't looking for like just the best of what hip hop or whatever is, you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
client's looking for very specific things. And so the AI is a great starting point. Or if you're your own boss and you're producing your own podcast and you have no idea what audio standards are, just put it through the AI and it'll do, if that's good enough for you, great. Is it going to sound as good as Joe Rogan's? No, because Joe Rogan has a person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just not going to be as good.
Do you think the AI will replace voice actors?
I think AI, and this already exists, by the way, AI will make it cheaper and easier for actors.
How
As
so?
long as actors can stay on top of it, and just speaking to my industry specifically, right? There's a strike going on right now, and I think AI is a part of that conversation. Reason being, and we can do this now. This is actually possible right now. It's just not legal. Let's say we have Robert Downey Jr., who was Iron Man, right? Let's say we have him on a podcast we're doing a Marvel joint, and he's doing Marvel the voiceover, and he messed up the pronunciation of a location, but this location happens 50 times. If we pay Robert Downey Jr. to reread 50 lines, it's gonna be a lot of money
Ooh,
because he's gonna be
yes.
in a studio for like an hour or two redoing all of those. Not only that, his performance will suffer. Whenever you have someone who has to do that amount of rereads and they get kind of bummed out and you can hear it in their voice because like they might have liked their original performance,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can give them references, but in the moment when you're acting, right, it comes out a different way. It'll comes out this authentic way than when you're doing rereads and it's just the one line and maybe the person who was sitting across from you is no longer there. So now it just doesn't sound the same.
Yeah.
Instead, we could just synthesize it within the take that we already have based on his voice. This is already possible. It's just not legal. So
Oh,
now he doesn't
wait.
have to come back in.
Are you sure it's not legal? Because I've heard some ads, some political ads. Some of them sound like Donald Trump, but I can tell it's not him. It is like a synthesized version. And some sound like Barack Obama. I've heard these voiceovers. Some of the ads are political, some ads are not political, but I can tell they are synthesized AI versions of these politicians' voices, and people are using them. I can hear it.
Well, you can sign off on it.
I
If you
don't.
don't want to do
I
it,
don't
you
think.
can sign off
I
on
don't
it.
think these people signed off on these things.
That so there's no laws right now. So that's why
Yeah.
people are doing it. There is no laws around it, but that's why I say you shouldn't do it because it's literally not made legal yet. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily illegal, but it's not legal. Like that person could sue you and probably win
Yeah.
if they really wanted to because like what are you doing with my voice? You can't take someone's their normally people's like especially actors like their personas and stuff
Yeah,
like
their
them
likeness.
their likeness is copywritten and protected and trademarked. Like you can't just do that. Like you could get into a lot of trouble. So when I say it's not legal, I mean like if we did that and it was like, hey, we synthesized your voice, he'd lose his money. Robert Downey Jr. loses money because we were
Yeah.
gonna pay him a couple $1,000s to come back. So now he don't have that money. But let's say something like that bad happens and he agrees like, I really like what I did. Hey, can we synthesize your voice? Yes, you can. Can we use your synthesized voice rate? Yes.
Oh, it's a
And
separate
so
rate.
it right. That's how I think it could be beneficial
No,
because now
see,
you have a rate set for that.
but that's still not beneficial. Let's say, I don't even know what the rates for voiceover actors are, but let's just say it's 100 an hour to actually perform this. And let's say my synthesized rate is like $40 an hour. So if I'm like sick or have laryngitis, fine, and you need me to record stuff, use my synthesized rate. I make money I would have lost because I was sick or I was tired or I didn't want to re-record it. I didn't have the mindset. But if like you just want to do that as a producer, you have a budget, you want to save money, and you keep wanting to use my synthesized voice because you keep just wanting to pay me 40 an hour, not 100. As an actor, I'm going to lose a lot of money, and it's a bad thing.
So that's where I think like contractually you have to write in the level of fixes that would need to be like, there should be a threshold, right? Like if it's a certain style or type of error where like it would be better suited for the actor to come in and they want to come in, I think the want part is going to be the biggest thing. Then I think they should be able to come in and perfect their performance, right? Because that is their likeness, it's their name. They want to be able to be proud of something, so they have to be able to come in and fix that how they want to. But it's like, yo, hey, you said that thing instead of these things. We changed it to plural from singular or something like that. Just fix it, man. Like I'm not driving all the way downtown LA to a studio to go fix one line. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? So there's that too. Like, I just take the lower rate because we have to book an hour. That's the thing. Like, you can only book an hour unless you have a really good relationship with a studio. You can only book the studio for an hour, and then we can't pay you for 15 minutes of your time. We pay you for an hour. So if the studio's $300 an hour and this actor is $200 an hour, that's $500 for one word.
Yeah.
Or we could just do the AI rate. We'll still pay you. Maybe it's just $100 to use 1 hour of AI audio or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's half your rate.
Yeah.
Fine,
And where
we'll
it can
do
become
it that way.
beneficial is, say I recorded this, you need to add it to plural or something like that. And then I can go take this other job at $200 an hour and you can use my synthesized rate at $40 an hour. So now I'm two places at once. So that is how it could be beneficial. But I don't think it's going to work out in an actor's favor like that much that often. I think it's going to be in producers and production companies' favor, the way the AI is. I hope you're right and that people can learn to use it like ethically and then it benefits everybody. But I think it's going to be the producer are just going to use it to underpay writers. I mean, not writers, actors, but then also writers. I think they're going to be using AI generated scripts. They're going to bring a creative writer in to edit and enhance it, but at a much lower rate. And so like the screenwriters are not going to make as much money if they lose this strike.
Yeah. And I'll be clear too. Like I'm speaking mostly in my world. So that podcasting audiobook world, because I've seen some terrible things that are just like, this poor person has to come back in. You know what I mean? And they're on set already doing something else. You know what I mean? So like now they got to split their time. So I've seen that side of it, but you're right. Like there's just too much room right now for, and that's why I say it's not legal. And while we don't use it, it's too much space for where it could get taken way out of context and get out of control. So just stay away from it for now.
Yeah, exactly. But the good news is there is like, luckily the strike is going on because what's happening in Hollywood will eventually affect your world with the audiobooks and podcasts. So they're going to set the temperature and the tone. So hopefully it works out for the artists because I don't know. I'm rooting for the creators and the artists for sure.
Me too.
Please come back next month for part 2 of this interview with Cory Barton.